Notice is hereby given of the regular meeting of the Board of Education of the Town of Westfield in the County of Union, New Jersey at 7:30 p.m. on the evening of Tuesday, March 19th, 2013, in the boardroom of the Administration Building, 302 Elm Street, Westfield, New Jersey. The purpose of the meeting is to transact the regular business of the Board and to transact any other business that may properly come before the Board. This is to advise the general public and to instruct that it be recorded in the minutes that in compliance with Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975, entitled the Open Public Meetings Act, the Westfield School Board on Friday, March 15th, 2013, caused to be posted in the office of the Board of Education, located at 302 Elm Street, Westfield, New Jersey, and delivered to the Westfield Leader, the Star Ledger, the Westfield Library, the Town Clerk of Westfield, Alternative Press, and Patch.com, a meeting notice setting forth the time, date, and location of the meeting. Will you do a roll call?
Rich Matesic.
Here.
Lucy Biegler.
Here.
Ann Carey.
Here.
Mark Friedman. Brendan Galligan.
Here.
Roseanne Kerstead.
Here.
Ginny Lights.
Here.
Gretchen Olig.
Here.
Mitch Slater.
Here.
All right, if you join me in the flag salute.
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Announcements. Brendan, anything down there?
This comes from the elementary schools. On Friday, April 12th, is the new deadline for nominations for the 21st Annual Charles Philhauer Fellowship Award, designated for a full-time elementary teacher in the Westfield Public Schools. Letters of nomination are invited from interested citizens, parents, students, Westfield Public School staff members, and should be addressed to Charles Philhauer Fellowship Committee of the Westfield Rotary Club, care of the Office of the Superintendent of Schools, 302 Elm Street, Westfield, New Jersey, or emailed to rotaryphilhauer@westfieldnjk12.org.
I have one as well. From the intermediate schools, the National Geographic Society has notified the Westfield Public Schools that the results of the written test taken by school winners Colby Chen from Edison Intermediate and Jasper Lember from Roosevelt Intermediate have qualified the sixth graders to progress to the state level of competition. The state round will be held on April 5th at Rowan University. Did I say that right?
Yes.
This will be the third consecutive year that Westfield will be represented. We congratulate Colby and Jasper, and we wish them continued success.
And this is under Fine Arts. The Wizard of Oz will be performed by Edison Intermediate School students on Thursday, 11th, at 4 p.m. as an elementary school matinee, at which students must be accompanied by a parent or an adult. Performances for the general public will be on Friday and Saturday evenings, April 12th and 13th at 7:30 p.m. Advanced sale tickets will begin on Tuesday, April 2nd in the Edison Auditorium lobby. Ticket prices are $5 on Thursday and $8 for Friday and Saturday for reserved tickets. Ticket price at the door will be $10. And the painting created by McKinley student Alexandra Brennan, titled Abstraction, was selected to be displayed at the Department of Education building in Trenton. Fourth grader Alexandra is the youngest of 13 artists chosen from over 50 candidates throughout the state. Her art teacher is Allison Hooper Corkage. Congratulations, Alexandra.
I have an election update. The county clerk's office has announced that candidates for the Westfield Board of Education must file petitions on or before 4 p.m. on June 4th, 2013, in person at 2 Broad Street, room 113 in Elizabeth. The election will be held Tuesday, November 5th, 2013. Information is available at www.ucnj.org/CTY-clerk. C-L-E-R-K. Those whose terms are expiring this year in Westfield include Brendan Galligan, Ginny Lights, and Mitch Slater. They have not yet announced their intentions to run for re-election.
Anything down?
Congratulations to Tamaqua Elementary School teacher Frank Fusey has been named the New Jersey Agriculture Society's 2012-2013 Teacher of the Year for his work educating children about the importance of New Jersey agriculture. He has earned an all-expense paid trip to the National Ag in the Classroom Conference to be held in Minneapolis June 25th through June 28th, which will include admission to teacher workshops and lectures. The award presentation will take place on April 5th at the Forest Gate Country Club in Jamesburg, New Jersey. Congratulations.
From Westfield High School, congratulations to our latest round of students who achieved perfect 800 scores on their SATs. They include Thomas Pyle, Rachel Fan, and Patrick Harris for math, Adam Ladge for Math 2, and Matthew Lupino for writing. Congratulations. Also at the high school, last week I think it was, former Rutgers football defensive tackle Eric LeGrand delivered a very inspirational message to the Westfield High School student body on March 1st about overcoming adversity. LeGrand, who was paralyzed in 2010 on the football field, is very well known for his positive attitude and graciously accepted questions from the students. He told the students, everyone has to deal with adversity. You have to believe in yourself. He advised them to be a family and help each other out. There is no time for bullying in schools. And really happy that he was able to come. It was quite a program.
And this is about our gifted program. 27 students ranging from 3rd grade to 5th grade and representing all 6 Westfield elementary schools competed in the Odyssey of the Mind Liberty Regional Competition on March 2nd in Somerset, New Jersey. The students are part of the gifted program based at Edison Intermediate School. 2 Westfield Odyssey of the Mind teams earned first place honors at the competition, and 1 team earned 3rd place, qualifying them for the state finals competition set for April 13th in Ewing, New Jersey. The top 2 teams in each category of that competition will advance to the World Finals. That will be held on May 21st in Lansing, Michigan. We wish the students continued success. For more information, visit the following website, www.njootm.org. www.njootm.org. Congratulations to our students.
And I have a letter that I received that I wanted to share. The letter comes from the state of New Jersey, and on the letterhead it has Governor Chris Christie, Lieutenant Governor Kim Guadagno, and Commissioner of Education Christopher Surf. Dear Dr. Dolan, please accept my warmest congratulations on the many prestigious awards and accomplishments recently earned by students of Westfield Public Schools. Whether it is the National Merit Finalists, state champion swim teams, or accomplished musicians, all of the students you heralded in your recent message to Westfield parents deserve recognition for their academic, athletic, artistic, or extracurricular honors. The stature and wide range of the accomplishments are a testament to the commitment of not only the students, but also their parents, teachers, and administrators. Please extend my congratulations to your students for their many noteworthy achievements, and to your staff for the important role they play in nurturing great students. Sincerely, Christopher Surf. Yes, it was wonderful to receive that, and I did want to make sure I did share it with students and families and teachers and administrators.
Thank you. The Westfield Public Schools will be closed from March 23rd through March 30th for spring break. We hope that everyone enjoys the break. And the next Board of Education meeting will be held this Thursday, March 21st at 7:30 in the auditorium of Westfield High School. It will be a public hearing on the budget. At the start of the meeting, we will be honoring the state champion girls and boys swim teams and the cross-country team, which won the state sectionals this school year. With that, I would recognize the public for agenda items only. Seeing no one come to the podium, I'll move to the superintendent's report.
And our first superintendent report has to do with the budget. We've certainly been talking about that for many meetings, but I will turn again to Mrs. Sullivan to talk about our proposed budget for next year.
Thank you. Good evening. Okay, some of this will be repeated information from previous meetings, and some will be new information that we'll be presenting tonight. As a reminder, the highlights of what's in the 2013-14 budget, we were able to continue our funding for our literacy initiative. We've been able to continue funding for the technology initiative. Our STEM program will be maintained. All mandated programs will be funded, including special ed. All of our curricular and co-curricular programs will be maintained. Our current class size in all of our levels, elementary, middle, and high school, we will be able to maintain in this budget. We have provided resources for enrollment increases at the intermediate level. Our facilities will continue to be a top priority in the budget. We are able to increase support for counseling services, mostly at the high school. We do have a 2% tax levy increase in this budget. We are below the state adjusted cap by $479,294. So what that means is the state does allow you to increase above the 2% for certain costs, one of them being health insurance costs. They also allow you to adjust that cap if you were under cap in prior years, which you were, I believe it was 10-11. So we could have increased the budget another about 0.5%. However, we did maintain it at the 2% increase. Our state aid, and we talked a lot about this at the last meeting, we get state aid in several areas: transportation, special ed, and security aid. While we had minor variances in each one of these types of aid, our overall increase was $1. The extraordinary special ed aid is not a basic state aid, so that means that we have to submit an application for that aid, which we have done for this year. However, we won't know how much we're going to receive even for this year until the end of this fiscal year. We are estimating in the 2013-14 budget that we'll receive $1 million. We think it'll actually be a little higher than that, but conservatively we're estimating $1 million. State aid has been decreasing over the years, as you can see by this chart, and the amount of the total budget that has been supported by state aid has decreased quite dramatically. Back in the late 80s, it was 11%, even higher before that, in the early 80s, and prior to that, dipped to a real low point in 2010 at 1.4% of the budget. And for the last 2 years, it's been approximately 4%, a little under 4% of the budget supported by state aid. Tax rate, as I mentioned, was going up 2%, as it has for the past several years. That also was much higher in previous years, up to high as 8% in 2002. Hovered kind of in the 4s, which was a cap for a while. And now we are at 2% and have been for the last 2 years. The budget is broken up out by funds. So our total budget is $96,402,166 for the 2013-14 budget. That is broken out into the general fund, the special revenue fund, and the debt service fund. The general fund is what would be called our operating budget, so all of our regular expenses fall into the general fund. The special revenue fund is for state and local grants that are for a specific purpose. So any money that we receive in that fund, we receive revenue, and then we have offsetting expenditures that must be spent in accordance with grant guidelines. We are not able to budget for many of those grants until we receive official notification, which is why you see a decrease from 12-13 to 13-14. And the debt service fund is where we pay the interest and principal payments on our outstanding debt. So the general fund is broken out into several different categories. And these accounts are all prescribed by the state, so we don't have a choice in how we account for these. We have instruction, co-curricular and athletics, health guidance and media, extraordinary services, related service and child study team costs, school administration, operations, maintenance of plant, transportation, and capital outlay. And I'm going to talk a little bit more detail about each one of those areas in the slides that are coming up. I want to point out, you see a decrease in the total general fund budget, and the reason for that is the 12-13 budget actually gets adjusted as we are going through the year. So every time you approve a transfer out of maintenance reserve, it actually increases the 12-13 budget. So although you do see the budget going down, it's really going down because you increased it this year for those costs. As you get into the 13-14 school year, you'll start increasing that budget as you start transferring funds from the maintenance reserve account. So it's a little bit misleading when you see that decrease. So in the area of instruction, we have salaries and benefits. So this would be for all of your teachers, regular ed and special ed, and all of your paraprofessionals in the district, and any other staff that would be considered instructional staff. Out of district tuition, most of that is for special ed students that are placed in schools that are not in this district. And then there are some vocational ed students that we also pay tuition for. Instructional supplies are just that, textbooks, staff training, instructional copiers, instructional technology equipment, copiers, and other miscellaneous costs. And our total instruction cost is then $57 million. The staff that's included in instruction, we have an increase here of 4.4 middle school teachers for enrollment. That's at Edison School. We do have a decrease of 2 1-5 teachers, and that's because we expect our first grade enrollment to be slightly less than it is this year. We have a 0.2 increase in 9-12 teachers, and that's for the Mandarin program at the high school. We're increasing from 4/10 to 6/10 for that position. We are adding 2 special ed teachers for 2 self-contained classes at the high school, 2 paraprofessionals to go in those classrooms, and then we're adding a resource teacher also in the district. So that's a total of 7.6 increases in instructional staff. In the area of co-curricular and athletics, the salaries and benefits includes salary of 1.4 trainers for this year, and also 1 clerical position. It also includes all of the stipends that are paid to our coaches and all of our advisors at the high school and at the middle school level. In 13-14, we are adding 2 hockey coaches, a volleyball coach, and we're also increasing the trainer's time from 4/10 to 5/10. We have an increase in officials' dues and fees. Some of that is due to the fact that we've been very successful over the past several years and had our seasons extended going into tournaments and finals. So we've increased our fees there for officials as well as dues. Just a little note about athletics. We have 27 sports at the high school. We have 64 teams. So most of our teams have at least a varsity and a JV team. We have 6 teams at the intermediate schools. We have 1,075 of our high school students, so 58% of our high school students participate in at least one sport. And we have 1,655 players at the high school level, so we have several hundred or more that actually participate in multiple sports. And at the intermediate level, we have 128 students that participate. Health guidance and ed media. Ed media is library. So we have salaries and benefits for our nurses, our guidance counselors, our librarians. This also includes our master tech teachers who are in the ed media section. Supplies and materials. And the purchased educational and technical services in this area is where we charge all of our testing for kids, neurological and psychiatric evaluations that must be done on children. Our school doctor, which is a requirement that we have, is also charged there. And some other testing costs that directly related to students are charged in that account. And the staff associated with that is 54.7 staff. And as I said, it's nurses, it's our attendants and health clerical workers, guidance counselors, secretaries to the guidance department, our librarians, our 2 master tech teachers, clerical staff in the libraries, and a TV technician. Extraordinary special ed services, and this is a state account that we're required to charge all of our personal aides, so all of our paraprofessionals for individual students are charged to these accounts. We currently have 86.1 paraprofessionals that serve in that capacity in the district. And then our services, outreach services for autistic students and our ABA therapy are also charged as extraordinary services. Related services and child study team, salaries and benefits, contracted services. Contracted services is where we pay our outside contractors that do evaluations. They do child study team evaluations in addition to our staff evaluations that are done. We also have speech and language evaluations that are done by outside consultants. We have behaviorists that are not employees that work with our students and our staff. And we also have OT, occupational and physical therapy services that are contracted with outside agencies. Residential services are for special ed students, and usually these are court-ordered placements that we're required to provide residential costs for. And then supplies and materials. The staff that falls in this category is speech, occupational therapists, and physical therapists. Our child study team is our learning disabilities teacher consultants, our psychologists and our social workers are all charged here, and the clerical staff that work with those professionals. School administration, salaries and benefits, supplies and materials, and professional training, and some rental costs. And these are where all of our principals and assistant principals would be charged, and all of our school secretaries are part of school administration. And all of our other administration, including all of our central office costs, would be in operations. Salary and benefits, our legal and audit fees are in these accounts. All of our communication and phone costs would be here. Our liability and casualty insurance is charged to operations. Supplies and materials that would be non-instructional are in these accounts. And then we have costs for, again, printing, dues, and training costs. And the staff that would be in operations, we have 5 administrators, 1 school and community relations specialist, 8.7 technology technicians, 1 supervisor of accounts, 2.5 payroll people, and 12 clerical in various departments in central office. And our maintenance costs. These are other accounts where we show decreases that are not real decreases. Cleaning, repair, and maintenance. Some of those costs in 12-13 were increased because we, again, transferred funds from maintenance reserve and charged them to cleaning, repair, and maintenance. So it shows like 12-13 is going, the 13-14 is decreasing from 12-13, but it's really because 12-13 was increased due to that transfer of the maintenance reserve account. Also, I want to point out the additional fund balance appropriated. That was in January. We appropriated $720,000 for security and for maintenance costs. So that also shows as a decrease next year because that hasn't been appropriated in next year's budget. And our property insurance also shows as part of maintenance. Our other insurance costs I noted were in operations. And the staff that goes with maintenance, we have a supervisor of maintenance. We have 9 maintenance people. We have 44.4 custodians. We're actually increasing that to 44.8 next year, and that increases at Edison School. Again, because of the enrollment increases that we expect there, and also to provide equity with the other middle school. And we have 2 groundskeepers. We have 3 paraprofessionals at Westfield High School that work on the outside, and we have 1 secretary in the maintenance department. In transportation, this is all of our transportation costs for the district. All of these are going up 2%, which reflects the maximum amount that our contracts can increase. Otherwise, we would have to rebid them all. The only thing that's going up more than that is athletics and field trips. And that's because, again, due to the success we've been having with our athletic teams, we've been running short in that account on our transportation. So we've increased that for next year so that we don't have a shortfall there. The aid in lieu, just to point out, that is a requirement by the state. We are required to reimburse parents who have students in that place their students in private schools. We're required to reimburse them or provide transportation to them. And that's what that account provides. And more information about our transportation. We have 20 in-district routes that serve 443 students. We have 47 routes that transport 89 students to out-of-district programs. And those routes are shared with other school districts through the Union County Educational Services Commission, so that we're able to reduce our costs by sharing with other districts. And then we have 6 routes that transport, again, private school students, which is less expensive for us than reimbursing their parents. So we have a total of 690 students transported. And the area of capital outlay, this is again another area that's showing a large decrease, but this is another area where many of those 12-13 costs were transfers from maintenance reserve. So although it's really it's showing a decrease, there's really not a decrease in this account. The School Development Authority, the debt service assessment we talked about at the last board meeting, this is a repayment to the state on the grants that they awarded years ago for capital projects. They are now assessing us a portion of the principal and interest that has to be paid on that. So that has increased from $48,000 to $75,000 to $30,000. And then we have some equipment in grades 6 to 8 and 9 to 12 that are for art and music. It's various pieces of equipment. And special revenue fund, I mentioned earlier, this is local and federal, state, local, and federal grants that are designated for a particular purpose. For many of these grants, we are projecting 75% of the funding for next year, and that's guidelines we're receiving from the state as a result of the sequestration that's happening in Washington. Also, 12-13 numbers reflect carryovers in some cases, so what looks like a decrease of more than 25% may be because 12-13 has carryover funds in it as well. And these numbers will increase again as we go through next year and we receive official notification of certain grants. I expect that the special revenue fund will increase as the year goes through. And our debt service fund, our outstanding debt at the end of this school year will be $21.2 million. And this slide shows our interest and principal payments for this year and next year on that outstanding debt. And the remaining calendar for the Board of Ed. We have one more meeting on Thursday night where we will hold a public hearing and then the board will adopt the final budget. This budget, by the way, was after the March 5th meeting. It was sent to the county, and the county school business administrator and the county superintendent have approved the budget this week, actually. So, does anybody have any questions?
Anyone? Questions, comments?
Have a question?
Yeah.
So where is the fine arts budget in your presentation?
Well, most of the fine arts in the athletic and co-curricular, the stipends that would be paid to any fine arts advisors or any stipends that they would get would be included in there. But most of the fine arts costs are teachers because they're regular teachers in the buildings, so they would be in instruction. They're not broken out separately.
And is there any increase in the fine arts budget this year? Are
There-
we
There,
doing anything new?
There's equipment. That's where the equipment that's in there is for, I can tell you in a minute. It's a MacBook Pro for art classes at Roosevelt. There's a vibraphone, which I'm not sure what that is.
It's a great instrument. It's a
It's what?
wonderful instrument.
Okay.
It's great fun to play.
And then at the high school, there's money for 4 French horns and a bassoon. And other than that, I believe most of their other budget is about the same as last year. There might be a slight increase over that.
I think, for example, as part of the increase at the intermediate school is actually a 4/10 increase at the intermediate school because of the increased enrollment, so.
Of a art teacher?
Art and
or-
music.
Art and music.
Art and music.
So I thought that there was a request for an art teacher and maybe a music teacher to restore the art and music levels at the elementary school.
Right, it was discussed. The priority was determined to be at the intermediate level, and that's where it is 4/10. I would imagine we will hear the request at the elementary level again, but the priority this year was for the intermediate. When Dr. King and myself looked at all the numbers.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone from the audience on the topic of budget only? All right, thank you very much.
I'm sorry, I had. The capital outlay, the 2012-2013 School Development Authority Debt Service Assessment, that was the first year that the state had done something like that, is that correct?
No, 11-12.
11-12 was the first.
11-12 was like 33, I believe.
Okay,
So every year it's increasing. Well,
okay.
we don't know what it's based on, but
And the extraordinary aid, no, not the extraordinary aid. The special fund,
special revenue.
the special revenue, while that will increase the budget, it has no impact on the tax increase because that is grant money from federal, state, or other places. So if the
That's
budget will
correct.
increase, it does not impact the state, the taxes.
That's correct, and because when you increase the budget for whatever revenue you receive in that area,
Right.
you have to spend it for a designated purpose, and you can't use it to supplant and, take other expenses away from the budget, so yes.
I'll wait.
No, you go, you're good, you're good.
Where is the money for the student resource officer?
It is in maintenance, I'm sorry. It's in maintenance, so if you look at page 10, it's combined with water and purchase services. It's in there. It's considered a purchase service because actually the town, since it would be a police officer, that would have to be employed by the town because they would be part of their pension system and whatnot, we would actually pay the town as a contracted service, which is why it's considered a purchase service.
Okay, great. And what is the status of that conversation with the town?
Sure. So we've had the conversation with the town. We certainly are interested. The school resource officer is a position that had been at the high school for a number of years, and then for the past few years we haven't had it. We certainly support the idea, and we know that the town is working on it, and we're hopeful that that's going to be the case, that we'll be able to have that in place by September.
And so we have, half funding, half salary funding?
That would, my guess is that's how it's going to end up, yes.
And that's what's in the budget?
Yes, yes, that the town and the school district would share it, yes. Yes.
Okay. There's something else, what was it?
I'll ask a
yes.
quick question.
Sure.
If you
Go
have
ahead.
it, go, before you lose it, go. It's
Okay, it's about security. Dollars put aside for security, and that is gonna be in a maintenance reserve fund?
Well, we actually have dollars put aside in this 12-13 budget that we appropriated in January.
Yes.
So depending on, we're still waiting on more information from the architect about the vestibules and
Right.
some other things. Depending on how much of that we actually get done this fiscal year, probably most of it won't get done this fiscal year because that ends June 30th. So it'll probably be the summer. It will either be spent out of this year's budget or you'll have to decide if you want to put it into the maintenance reserve to take it back out and spend it for security. that's a decision we'll have to make when we get to June or after June.
And other than the vestibule modifications, did we agree that there was anything else we wanted, any monies we wanted to put aside for any other security upgrades?
We're still looking at some other upgrades. Nothing's final yet.
And some have already been done within the schools. You know,
Yes.
The ones that could have been done immediately have been done and are in
Yes.
place.
I guess a more comprehensive conversation is going to take place shortly with the Facilities Committee when we get more answers on that.
Yes.
I'm trying to remember where we left the
No, that's where
topic.
we left it. They're gathering data, and when we have that, we'll
Right.
complete that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Gretchen, did you have
I'm good. I found the answer.
anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you. We have a second superintendent report this evening. Every year, twice a year, every school district, every public school district in New Jersey is required to report to the state the number of incidents we have of what is considered violence, vandalism, substance abuse, and also harassment, intimidation, and bullying, which are combined in the acronym HIB. If I slide into HIB, it is harassment, intimidation, and bullying. So this evening, I'm going to present a review of the data that is reported to the state from Westfield, and I also asked the district's anti-bullying coordinator, Mr. Joseph Malanga, to come this evening to talk about some of the work that he's been doing and the district has been doing in this area. So I'll start with the PowerPoint with a lot of the numbers, et cetera, and then Joe will come up and talk about some of the work we've been doing. According to the state regulations, we're required to report twice a year, and they tell us what the time period is that we're reporting on. So I'm now reporting on from July 1, 2012 to December 31st, 2012. As you notice, that starts in the summer. Our schools are relatively quiet in the summer, and usually the only kind of reports we might get during that time, we do occasionally get some incidents of vandalism over the summer, and they can be included. But other than that, the summer months are rather slow. The second time period will be from January 1 to June 30th. That's typically a time when we're all here, so those numbers tend to be a little bit larger, and you'll see that in our charts going forward. Let me start with something that's the most important, and that is the Westfield Code of Conduct. What we really try to strive and work on is making sure that all members of the district exhibit strong character, including integrity and honesty, a work ethic, and sportsmanship. And that's something we try to instill in all our students. That's something which we attempt to model as adults, and it's what we try to attain every day, actually, whether we're working with our little ones in kindergarten or our high school students, everybody in between as well. Matter of fact, this spring we're going to be looking at the Code of Conduct again with some members of the public to take a look at it, make sure it still reflects what we want it to reflect, and to revise it as the community thinks we should revise it. So I already mentioned the state reports. This is the report for the beginning of the year. I'm required to report all incidents of violence, vandalism, and substance abuse. When it regards HIB, I'm required to report all those that are confirmed cases. There are a number of cases that are opened that are not confirmed. Okay? And what I'm required to report, not surprisingly, especially to the public, are the numbers. We would never report the names of any student. All of that is always confidential. All right, so during that time period, from July through the end of December, and including the time of Sandy when we were closed for 8 days, we had 5 incidents of violence, vandalism, and substance abuse involved in the schools. You can see a breakdown there was at least one time when the police were notified, but at that point a complaint wasn't filed, and another time when a complaint was filed. And although there were 5 incidents, there was more than one child involved in some incidents, so there were 7 short-term suspensions regarding those incidents. There's then a breakdown on offender information. You can see there are 4 regular education students and 5 students with disabilities who were offenders. And in regards to victims, there were 4 regular education students and 3 students with disabilities. There's a separate category now for the harassment, intimidation, and bullying. And And this year we had 6 confirmed cases. You can see the previous year, you can see the 2 sections of the year in the other columns. The numbers were much, much higher. That was the first year of HIB. We certainly did a lot of workshops last year, making sure that students and parents and teachers and administrators all understood the requirements of the New Jersey law, which were very, very specific as to what constitutes harassment, intimidation, or bullying. I think that number is lower for a few reasons, including more people have a better understanding of what HIB is in New Jersey, and also because it was a short period of time and we did lose a lot of time to Sandy. I think, I'm sure, for example, when we look in a while at what happened between this past January and June, we're going to see numbers that are a bit higher. So that is a very, very low number for first part of the year. Out of the 6 investigations, there were 4 confirmed. All of those complied with the requirement that the investigations be completed within the 10 days, and all of those complied with the fact that after that, I affirmed the decisions in those cases, and that is then presented to the board, and then the board acts on those as well. There's a breakdown into how those cases, what were the characteristics. In order to qualify for bullying or in New Jersey, there has to be a personal characteristic. So the child who was bullied, they were bullied because of something, because they were a different color, a different race, a different religion, whatever. So we had one instance where it had to do, and by the way, it can be more than one characteristic according to the law. So there's some duplication here. So there was one student who was bullied or intimidated because of race, another by color, another by gender, and 2 by other distinguishing characteristics, and those are very specific to children. What did we do in all those instances? In many, many of the instances, it involved different types of counseling. A lot of cases, there was something very specific we needed to work on with children. And in other cases, it was group counseling because the children really needed to practice how do you interact with peers. It was something that some children were not very good at and needed practice on it. Certainly also student conferences where you work to make the students understand and take responsibility, a very important step. Parent conferences, definitely the support of the parents is very important in these instances, and I will tell you that parents do take these incidents very, very seriously. There are also detentions, suspensions, and there are other measures that fit the situation depending on the age of the child, the problem that was found, and what really is going to make a difference to try to make sure we stop the behavior going forward. When we look at the way the harassment, intimidation, bullying expressed itself, sometimes it certainly is written, and certainly sometimes it can involve the internet. There's no question at all. It's just so easy to do that, to hurt somebody when you're far away from them and you're using the internet. There was one where it was physical, and verbal is also very easy, and I think our students, unfortunately, especially if they're watching TV or some movies, get many examples of how to hurt others by using words to hurt others. So that's the summary of what the state requires. It is very important that parents and students all understand that at every school there is an anti-bullying specialist. So if there is a concern, if there is an issue where someone is not treating somebody appropriately, it really should be reported immediately to that anti-bullying specialist. We have the list posted on the internet. Also on the internet, if there are questions, we provide some information to help people understand what bullying is and what steps can be taken. And I would encourage people, if they have questions, to check on there as well. But a lot of work goes on in this district to make sure that we are fighting against bullying, and we are bringing up a generation of students who respect each other and respect themselves. So I think Joe Malanga is going to tell us about some of the work that goes on in Westfield in that regard.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Dr. Dolan, for inviting me here this evening. I've been in the position of the anti-bullying coordinator for the past 6 to 7 months, and I have found the job to have many facets to it. And most of my job or role in the district is to really deal with or pertains to mostly HIB. One of the things that I'm so fortunate to be in this district is because of my relationship with the administrators in district, very easy to communicate with them, starting at central office to the building principals, vice principals, and the 11 ABSs that we have, or anti-bullying specialists, in our district. My conversations with them evolves around changes in the law. I talk with them about county meetings that I attend, and it's 3 to 4 times per year when all of the districts in Union County meet, and we talk about experiences within our district and how situations are being handled. So it keeps us current on so many things that are happening at the state level that comes to the county, and then I could report it back to our own district. I'm constantly reviewing programs that are offered to schools for anti-bullying. And that's very, very important. Actually, I've gone out to see a few programs in other districts to see if they would be a fit for our district and at what level. I also spend many hours in recording documents, reviewing all case files that come across my desk. In reviewing those case files, at times I will call a principal or an ABS and say, I have a question about this. Is this something we could review before it comes to the superintendent or even to your level? So that's something that I do quite frequently, all of those different things. Also, reviewing the procedures and protocols of the Bill of Rights. And you all know how important it is to follow the timelines that are in the Bill of Rights. So that's something I keep on top of with the administrators of the ABS to make sure that the reports are handed in on time. According to the law, we are required to meet, or I'm required to meet twice per year with the ABSs. And we had our first meeting on February 18th of this year. And our discussions were about the law, of course, the Bill of Rights, but also we reviewed so many cases without indicating names. And the table discussion was about, well, do you really believe this is an HIB incident or not? So it's really very good discussion for all of us because we're all gaining experience as we go through this. This is only the second year that the bill is in place. So we're learning as we're going along. Also at that meeting, we discussed the implementation of a climate survey for the district. And I'm presently working on that with all the anti-bullying specialists and with Dr. Dolan. And our goal is by the end of the school year to have a survey in place for our staff, for students, and for our parents. We're working on developing the survey. The one we're presently looking at comes from the New Jersey Department of Education, and we're refining it to make it work for our district. Also, we're working on determining what grade levels, how we're going to select parents and staff in the survey. So that's something that we're presently working on, and I'll be working with Dr. Dolan to see when that will actually be done. The other thing that I oversee is activities like the Week of Respect in October, to make sure that all schools are participating in the different types of things that they're actually doing within their buildings. Also, I wanted to bring to your attention that our elementary counselors did a wonderful presentation in late January for our parents at Jefferson School. Somewhat disappointed with the turnout. A year ago, when we did it for the first time, we had over 60 parents in attendance, and at Jefferson School in January we had about 5. So I think there has become a comfort with the law, or a better understanding, or maybe it was just the time of the year. But we're looking at doing something a little differently next year because of that turnout. Our goal is to get the message out the best we can, so that's something we're working on. I wanted to also mention that most recently, I guess about a week ago, Dr. Dolan and I received something from the state regarding determining grades under the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights. The state was supposed to put into place a grading system at the end of last year, and that was never accomplished. So right now, they've given us a school self-assessment to look at, and we're reviewing that. And the first thing I will be doing is giving that to our school safety teams, so they can begin to review and also begin to determine how we're going to assess our schools, our individual schools, on how we're meeting the 8 requirements that are in the law or in the assessment. Just to give you some information, and I have to read this off because I'm not so familiar, so I apologize for that, but an individual school grade will be given based upon a 4-point rubric. A district grade will be calculated by averaging the total scores on the self-assessment from all schools in the district. District and schools are required to post the grades as follows. Each school must post their grade received by the school and district on their home page of the school website. In addition to that, the school district must post the grade received by the district and each school on their district homepage. So it'll be found in 2 different locations. The date for completing or certifying and submitting the self-assessments are due by August 15th, 2013. I believe there's also part of the law that states that the board has to also be informed about the self-assessment.
Right.
The grades for the self-assessment will be released in the fall of 2013. Some of the plans that I have for the remainder of the school year is, of course, my second meeting with the ABSs because that's part of the requirement. I've been working with the technology department to determine how we can use Genesis more for reporting the data. And Genesis is available to us for that purpose, so it's something that we're working on. Also, web page revisions. I'd like to look at our web page under anti-bullying and see how we can revise our forms to make it more presentable to the public, easier to read, have a better understanding of exactly what is under the law. And also, I'm in the process of revising district-wide forms, which may be helpful to you as well. We have so many different, we have the initials, we have the investigation, the principal's findings, the 5512 letter. If we can consolidate and put it in an easier, understandable form for you to read at the end, then the superintendent would be very helpful. And also something consistent throughout the district so that each school isn't coming up with their own form. So those are some of the things that we are working on. And if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them for you.
Thank you.
There's a comment. First of all, thank you, Joe. It was a great presentation. I would suggest maybe in the future with the programs for parents,
Yes.
maybe we video the next one and put it on our website.
And that was a consideration
Yeah.
already, because the program that they offered was so good. If we can video that and
Right.
put it right on the website.
You know, obviously they take a lot of time to put those presentations together, and
Yes.
it's a way of getting it out to everybody. It's not, not everyone can get out, so.
Earlier, Dr. Dolan mentioned about trends, and the one thing we can report is that there has truly been a decline in the amount of cases that are being reported, and I think a lot of that contributes to our counselors at all of our buildings, our ABSs, everyone doing a great job in terms of communicating and working with children, and of course applying the code of conduct in each building.
Again, thank you, Mr. Malenko. Very interesting. I'm wondering, as you attend the county meetings, what are you finding as you're sharing information among the county representatives? Are all districts finding a decline? Is there a similar trend? And what's the general feeling about where this is all going?
At the meeting that I recently attended in February, all districts were reporting a decline in the number of cases being reported. We also discussed, what are your findings? Because part of the law was to determine, or can we find patterns? Can we find trends so we can go in and begin to correct those situations. And what these districts are reporting, that in some cases they're repeated offenders. There are some, but not in all. Not enough to say that it's always these same students that are involved. We're also finding, their findings were that in some cases when one child becomes the victim, the next day that child becomes the bully because another parent report is given. So that's pretty common throughout all the districts that we're finding. Those were the two things that stood out at the meeting, the last meeting that we had.
I don't want to lead the witness, but but I'll tell you that that I don't know how to structure this question that doesn't actually give you some insight into what I'm thinking. But I'm wondering, what is the sense that there's some potential for the bullying process to be moving underground, that it's more insidiously or undetected? You know, in the way it's delivered, or is any of that a conversation, or is that not, or can I get rid of that thought as a possibility?
Hard question for me to answer.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's something we look for, because when you see such a decrease in the numbers, you say, well, what's really, I mean, right. But we spend so much time not just talking about it, but educating about this and about the right way to treat people and how people are hurt. The students receive so much instruction in this, so they're able to, I think the students who maybe they're not victims, they're not bullies, they are less likely to be bystanders these days because of the training they've had. So I don't think much is going to go underneath. I think, and all of the adults in the building, all the adults in the building are aware. So even if it's not a teacher standing there, a teacher could miss something if they're over on the other side. Whatever other adults there are, they're very aware of what is not acceptable and how students should be treated. So is it possible? It is, but honestly, we're looking out for it, because this law is not perfect, but boy, is it important. And we need to make sure we are constantly working to make sure students are treated the right way.
But as you look at that decline, could you just ballpark how much of the decline is a result of our refinement of our understanding of the law, or our refinement of our application of the law? Because I think what happened partially is about a year ago, a filter was put on the front end, so that not every allegation of an event it's less likely to be called a HIB, or it's just there's a narrower category of what we're calling HIBs. So that doesn't mean incidents didn't occur. It means that number of investigations go down under the HIB law. Number of HIBs confirmed obviously goes down because they're not reported as HIBs to begin with. But if you just looked at incidents, whether you call them a HIB or not by statute, has that number gone down as dramatically?
I would have to say yes.
Okay.
Do we track those? Do we track code of conduct violations that don't fall under the HIB law? But
I was thinking the same thing.
The principals have their own notes on that to keep track of it, yes.
and so we've also seen a decline in that number, or
That's hard to say, and I wouldn't say definitely there's a decline. I wouldn't say that.
I think probably in the beginning, everyone was still understanding the law, and every incident was, is it a HIB? It's a HIB. Let's do the investigation. We weren't sure where they would fall. But I think now, as everyone's understanding the law, parents, students, teachers, everyone, I think that's why it's narrowed down. But I still think the awareness has been so heightened that I don't think it's going to, like you said, go underground and go away, or, I think there's such a heightened awareness of it.
I can say this much, we're still very cautious. We don't push anything underneath or underground. We report exactly what is happening, and I think a lot of it has to do with our parents and our children and our teacher being better educated, and really focusing in on what's important, and kindness and all the things that come along. It's about a school with a good feeling, a good tone, a good climate, and I think those are the things that have been in this district and are continuing to improve. I really do.
Dr. Dolan, when you present in the fall for the first half of this year, could you try and get us some rough numbers on conduct violations, just so we can see if there's a trend with that as well?
We can try, or at least descriptors or something.
Yeah,
Something that
some
can-
kind of qualitative, if not quantitative, data.
He's saying where there has been consequence imposed for non-HIB conduct. Were you?
I was just
I was-
repeating. No, I think I
Oh.
understood it, but I
I'm sorry.
appreciate that.
Thought I picked up on a.
Yeah,
I don't get it.
a quizzical look. And I did want, and I did want to comment that in many, if many cases, if not all cases, code of conduct guides the consequence outcome to students within this,
Yes.
the HIB
Yes.
process of investigation, whether or not the investigation leads to the statement that the result is a bullying case or not a bullying case.
Yes.
The consequences can include often more than what the code of conduct requires, just so
Right.
the public is clear.
Are we tracking who makes the complaint? Like parent, teacher, counselor? Have we ever looked at that?
No, we haven't.
I think we should. Because it seems to me, it seems to me that most of them are, something happens at school, the kids go home, the parent calls to complain. I think, I'm just like remembering what I've read, and I would say like most of them are that, and I'm just curious about that.
I think you're very
I think it would be
accurate.
something interesting to look
I
at.
agree.
Yeah.
And I think that is, for the school safety teams, one good topic
Right.
to think about. Why is that? And what does it tell us? And,
Right.
yeah, I agree.
One of the more difficult things that I would imagine, that's I'm sure a real struggle, and we see from time to time, are children with special needs either being bullied or sometimes even being accused of being the bully. How is that handled? How is that looked at any differently? It obviously is a very tough situation, and maybe even Mike could comment on that. I just because that we see those from time to time, and I don't really.
To my
understand that
knowledge, and
process.
Dr. Weissman can
Sure.
say something if he doesn't feel what I'm saying is correct.
Right.
But I think it's okay. You can jump in. That they're treated very much in the same way. However, unless it's a manifestation of the disability, then other considerations are given. Is
Right.
that-
So if a special needs student or a student with an IEP is implicated in an HIB investigation, we have to follow through with the procedures, just like with any other student. But there might be an additional, there always is an additional step where the child's case manager is contacted, the IEP is reviewed, and they have a discussion as to whether or not they think the behavior is or the actions are a manifestation of the student's disability, that the behavior is related to the student's disability, and then they take that into consideration when they're developing further actions or consequences. And they take that into consideration, obviously, in consultation with the child's case manager, after thoroughly reviewing the IEP.
So if there's a special needs child that's accused, let's say, of being the bully, do the parents get involved prior to it being a HIB or anything like that?
We follow the same procedures as we would with a general education student, so no.
No.
Thanks.
I had one comment and then a question. I'm happy to hear that you are looking at the climate surveys. Ginny and I have been vocal
Eager.
about, eager, yes, to have those
Insistent.
get started. So I'm interested to see how that goes and excited that we are moving towards that. My other question is, has there been any talk at these county meetings that you go to about the law specifically and some of the inadequacies, difficulties within the law
That's a constant discussion around the table. We've been told that for this year, of course, the law has remained absolutely the same. There were no
Right.
changes. What we're hearing is that there may become some more discretion in the law starting in September, but no real changes that we've heard of definitely from Trenton.
So you haven't heard any news about how their definition of bullying
No.
is different than
Not-
what the federal government
not at all.
defines as bullying?
No.
I believe there's a,
I haven't.
right, there's a proposal that has gone from some state committee to, I believe, the commissioner or the state board, but there hasn't been action on it yet, as far as I know. So I think you're right, we're going to see changes for September, but we honestly don't know what they are and to what degree there'll be a change.
So, yes, I had neglected to say thank you for working on the climate survey. We look forward, I personally, with Roseanne, and I'm sure the rest of the board looks forward to seeing those come to fruition. And I personally would hope that that would be an annual event where we could gain knowledge about what's the perception of the school environments from these different constituents.
We're very interested in getting that information as well.
Yeah.
As administrators, it's very important to know about our climate.
Critical. Joe, I had a question that again, about your county group, the sharing of your information. Have you come across any insightful programs that are being instituted in other locations? Those programs being character building or the positive message programs? I know we have a variety that we have throughout our district, chosen, I guess, independently or shared by principals. And I'm just wondering, have you had any insights into others that you might consider worthy to look at?
There are times when a district will bring to our attention a specific program, and like I said, I've gone out to see 2 of them. They have to be the right fit for your district, because our county is involved with so many.
Yes.
We have urban districts, we have suburban, it's very different. And the 2 that I went to see, I was not comfortable with at all. And I really feel that in the very beginning, there was such an influx of presenters. Everyone was doing anti-bullying. That doesn't mean they're experts in that area. They're trying to sell their program. So we're very careful about that. And of course, the programs have to be appropriate for certain grade levels. What you would show at a high school, you surely wouldn't bring into an elementary school. And most of the programs that we see are geared for high school, that I see. And also, I believe our counselors at the elementary level do a fantastic job. They do the type of job that's necessary. So bringing an outside person in that you're not so certain about, I prefer to use our counselors because they are trained in that area. And the children know them, and it's a wonderful opportunity for our counselors to get into classrooms and do programs.
Do you expect to be involved in acclimating, orienting, or involving our student resource officer in his or her role in the high school as part of, a slice of what you're doing?
I'd be very welcome, to do that when the time comes and sit with the individual.
I don't know what the intention is as far as describing the role and responsibilities, the interaction with students and the...
Sure, no, I think that would make sense, that they have an understanding of what
Absolutely.
the definition
Something that
is
you
in our
could,
procedures, yeah.
Absolutely.
could add to that as we start to figure out how it works and what this individual responsibilities and interactions might be.
Very open to that once Dr. Dolan says.
Right. And then, Dr. Dolan, you mentioned that you plan to have a committee review the code of conduct. What committee might that be? How do you envision that committee?
Actually, the state helps with that. It gives you a suggestion. That's a very nice way to put it, wasn't it? State gives guidelines
Pass me that piece of paper. That's all there, right?
We actually, some of you might remember, we actually reviewed and revised, we actually dramatically revised our code of conduct last year, and we had board representation, we had parents, and we had other representatives from the community. We were actually just about ready to do that. do you remember back, like, say, late October? We were almost ready to launch that, and then we got a little bit busy with things like Superstorm Sandy. So we're going to, once we come back from the break, I'm going to reach out to some people, and we'll have a committee to do that, and certainly be reaching out to a few people at this table. We'll have board representation. But we'll have representation from different elements of the community.
I have one more question. You had mentioned in the climate survey, some things you were talking about with the climate survey is that the selection of parents
Yes.
and teachers, and I thought, well, that's strange, why aren't we just sending it to everyone and you get the return that you get?
Okay, that's something that we have to discuss further.
Right. Often what we've done with other surveys, not just climate surveys, though, is to use a random selection of parents. You know, we talked about doing a computerized one. We've done similar things in the past with surveys. For a number of reasons. Actually, generally, you don't want to send out the same survey every year to everyone because it loses its effectiveness. So if we can maybe specify certain grades, we were also going to look back and see. We were very lucky when we did the last large community survey. We had a member of our community whose life has been statistics and sampling, who sat with us and gave us guidelines for how to do that. So we were going to sit down again, look at the guidelines that were given to us, and come up with a structure that would work going forward. So.
And reasonably, there would be an opportunity to collect personal comments. So thinking about the potential volume of comments could be overwhelming if the sample is too large. But
Anyone else?
That would be a great problem.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very
Thank you.
Thank you.
helpful. Anything else under superintendent?
No, those are the only superintendent reports this evening.
I would then ask the board to approve the minutes of the board meeting held on March 5th, 2013, and the minutes of the private session of the board also held on March 5th, 2013. I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I'm going to abstain.
One abstention.
I don't think I was here that day. Is that the day? March?
Yeah.
Okay, look in the minute.
you were not.
Right. Thank you, Jenny.
You're welcome.
All right,
Did you abstain? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Two abstentions, no opposed.
Yes.
Thank you. With that, we'll go to personnel. In Mark's absence, I would ask the board to consider personnel motions numbers 1 through 13. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mitch. Any comments or questions before Dr. Dolan points out one item?
I have one retirement to announce tonight, and that's the retirement of Jerry Morrison. For the last 21 years, Jerry has served Westfield students, first as a classroom teacher at Washington School, and more recently as a basic skills teacher at both Jefferson and Tamaqua schools. Her deep knowledge of literacy skills, her careful and thorough preparation for each student's learning, and her commitment to her students have made her an effective teacher. Jerry has given of her time to the district also by serving on a number of committees, particularly the Professional Development Committee, where she has promoted meaningful ways for her colleagues to learn new skills and grow in the profession. A caring, articulate member of the staff, Jerry will be missed.
Any other comments or questions?
Rich Matesic,
Yes.
Lucy Biegler,
Yes.
Ann Carey,
Yes.
Brendan Galligan,
Yes.
Roseanne Kirsted,
Yes.
Ginny Lights,
Yes.
Gretchen Olig,
Yes.
Mitch Slater.
Yes.
All right, that brings us to facilities. I was going to mention our meeting with the town, which we already mentioned, and also that we are in fact continuing to gather data on these security items and potentially data on a generator. So that's sort of the larger items in the background for the facilities committee. Otherwise, I didn't have a report.
I think maybe Dana could
Roofs?
update on the roofs.
Oh, you're right. We do have an update on the roofs.
Yes, we are out to bid for the high school Roosevelt in Washington. We had a pre-bid conference earlier this month. We had quite a number of contractors come out for the conference. We also provided an opportunity for the contractors to go on all three roofs with the architect and ask any questions that they had about the specs. We are opening bids on March 26th, and we hope to have award of contracts on the agenda for April 9th. And work will start right after school closes.
Any questions on that?
Could you remind me what you were referring to when you said you told us about a meeting with the town?
That was regarding the school resource officer.
Oh,
Oh, yeah,
thank you.
sorry.
I
Right.
didn't know the topic. I guess I was supposed to guess.
Anyone else? All right. Going just to long-range planning.
Yes, I do have a report tonight. Long Range Planning Committee met on February 5th and also on March 12th. And tonight I'll mention one of the topics that we talked about, and that is the projected intermediate school enrollment. As was noted by Dr. Dolan last year after the enrollment study presented by Ross Haber Associates, 2013-14, which is next school year, will be the last year that we will send some Washington students to Edison Middle School, since in the future enrollment numbers seem to work without this redistricting change. So the current redistricting will end after 5 years of being implemented. There have been a number of parents in the Washington redistricted area whose current fifth graders are scheduled to attend Edison School next year. These families also have younger children. These children are in the 4th or 3rd grade, and based on the fact that redistricting will be ending, they will be attending Roosevelt Intermediate School when they get to 6th grade. The families have requested that their current fifth graders, be able to attend Roosevelt next year so that they will attend the same intermediate school that their younger siblings will be in attendance at once they start intermediate school. In the past, the board has allowed what we called grandfathering, when neighborhoods were being sent to a new school. Rising fifth graders who were redistricted to a different elementary school were allowed to stay in the elementary school that they had started their elementary career in. In this case, the 6th graders are asking to be allowed to move to a school outside their attendance zone to start their intermediate career, based on being able to attend, as I said, the same school as their younger siblings. And the Long Range Planning Committee did recommend to the superintendent, and recommends to the full board, that these 7 current 5th grade students who are in the redistricted attendance zone and who have younger siblings who will attend Roosevelt once redistricting has ended, we recommend that they have the opportunity to attend Roosevelt in 2013-14, which is the next school year. Any discussion?
How many students will be going to Edison from Washington if those 7 students are going to Roosevelt?
Well, the projected number was 27 for this coming year, so that would be 20.
And in the past, how many students have?
An average of 20, 21, 22 to 3. I think it, right?
Yeah.
Started with 21 first year.
From 20 to close to 30, I think.
Yeah, okay.
So the cohort's still considerably the same size as it's been without those 7.
Yeah. We know it's always been a relatively small group, but it hasn't lost enough of its number to be too small, I don't think. And this seems like, to the committee, this seemed like a reasonable request. On the other hand, another way to twist or look at at a request might be, someone might say that they would like their student to stay there, if they have, or younger siblings to come and join an older sibling who has already started school there. So, I think that the board is amenable to, at least the committee was amenable to, being flexible with family needs under these circumstances, as long as there's a seat for them.
If I remember an email correctly, you guys asked both building principals how it would affect their classroom numbers.
Yeah.
And the Roosevelt principal didn't seem to have a problem with it.
Correct. That's correct.
Yeah.
So if that is amenable to the board, then I can actually send out a letter
Dr. Dolan is ready, yeah, to send out a letter, I guess tomorrow,
to those families.
to the families to identify that this is an opportunity for them.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? All right. That brings us to policies. Gretchen?
Yes, I would ask the board to consider policy motion number 1 to approve for first reading the following policies: 131, 142, 142.1, 143, 144, and 145. May I have a second?
Second.
These policies were sent home in your board packets on March 8th, so I know you've had time to look at them, but I'll just very briefly recap the changes that the policy committee is recommending, or recommended to go into the changes. 131 was, we cleared up, I think this has actually been around the table a couple of times, 131, which is bylaws and policies. We kind of cleaned up the process by which the board and the policy committee makes bylaws and policies. We clarified the section under promulgation and distribution that would dictate that the policies would be maintained online. And then we also added a sentence. The policy committee has decided that we're going to start to review the policies on a 5-year cycle. And so in that process, there will be occasions where we will review a policy but not make any changes. We want to have the ability to note the review without bringing it to the full board, and just note that it's been reviewed, so that if someone looking at it on the website won't think it hasn't been reviewed for 6 or 7 years, but in fact it has been reviewed but no changes were made. So that change was also made on page 2 of the policy, right after the first paragraph of development of bylaws and policies. Anybody have any questions or comments on that? Jenny?
I don't agree with that.
Okay, do you want to talk about it?
Sure.
Okay. I'll tell you what our thinking was, and then you can, I think that we felt like the purpose of the policy committee is to do that work, and if there were no changes being made, that the board would have sufficient time to review those policies. It's not as if we're not sending them out to the full board for review, but rather than duplicate effort, that if we weren't recommending any changes, that it wouldn't necessarily have to be discussed among the full board at a business meeting. That was our thinking.
So could you explain the process that you plan to take, because that didn't come through in this, that's not what this says. What your statement says is that your committee can review them, you can mark them reviewed, and you can file them, as opposed to bring them to the table.
It says the full board shall be informed of those bylaws and policies reviews, but not changed by the committee. So it's not as if we will mark them reviewed and simply put them on the website. We'll inform the full board, and it's my intention, as long as I'm the chair of the policy committee, to make a statement of those in public. But it's just a matter of it not having to be a full review.
I don't think that's enough.
So why don't you, when you do
Why
the
not?
agenda, when you say here's the policies for review and approval, why don't you just have a section that says the following were reviewed with no change?
Absolutely.
And then if anybody wants
I
to,
think
you'll
that's
have-
what our
I
thinking
think that's
is.
what she was saying.
But I can't do that until we amend the bylaws to allow me to
No, I'm
do
just saying,
that.
that would,
Yeah.
then anybody could go, if they want to see what that is, anybody could go look at it.
That was
Right.
the discussion at the policies committee.
I don't think that that's enough. I think that the policies, given that they are, and the bylaws, given that they are the backbone of, and the law that governs our behavior and the expectation of the school district, should come before the board and have with an opportunity to at least agree through a vote that no change is necessary and therefore it should stand as written. I think that is the premier purpose of this or any board.
I see it, I feel like it's almost as if when the SIP committee brings some new curriculum for first reading, we don't reduplicate the effort of the SIP committee by having the full presentation of staff that's written the curriculum. I just think that's the purpose of a committee, is to make this review and to make a determination and to make a recommendation to the board. So we're making a recommendation that we have reviewed these, that we're not making any changes, and that they're going to be posted as such on the website.
But why not have the board
policies-
vote at that point? What's the difference then to have the board vote or not vote?
To me, there's a big difference. So if
I think the board should vote.
I got that. But if every board, to me, this is taking work out of the system. And it's using a committee of members of the board that have been given authority to look at and review policies.
Mm-hmm.
And if you give me a policy, I'm going to read it, review it, and look for comments. If on the other hand, you tell me you've reviewed 5 policies, you have no changes, I trust that as valid. I don't see a need to have to go through it myself. The whole board of 9 people can't do everything. It's to be honest, the fact that since we've started to review the manual for this 5-year cycle, I mean, it's killing us. It's a lot of work. And we read them, and it's killing me. Maybe it's not killing you, but it's a lot of work. And I appreciate the fact that you guys go through these, and you've made great changes in the policies, and you're keeping them up to date. But to the extent you can let us know that you've reviewed and don't have changes to a policy, I'm okay with that. I don't know how it's different than the finance committee presenting a budget that you don't know all the details of, or SIP presenting a curriculum that I don't know all the ins and outs of the conversations. I mean, committees have some authority to do work and move it forward. I don't see how this is different.
That doesn't change the authority of the committee.
I want to chime in. The intention is to move things along and to have documentation that the policies are not sitting dormant. Okay, that's number 1. Number 2, the notice that the full board gets that a policy was reviewed with no revisions suggested is a call to action for other board members who might be interested to read that policy to either agree or disagree. That's their call to action. So if they choose to read those that are reviewed but not changed, they can. They should, but they can. And if they have comments, then it will come back to the policy and possibly the full board. That's my understanding, and I think our intention with putting that in. And
I don't think you're saying if someone reviews it that we can't make a suggestion. I mean, it's just it's exactly what Roseanne's
absolutely,
saying.
at any moment, a board member could make a suggestion to a change in policy that would
Actually-
go to the policy committee and then come to the full board. So.
Actually, at any moment in time, any person on the board can say, I would like you to review this policy, I would like it changed for X, Y, and Z.
Right.
It goes to the policy committee, and then it comes back.
And then
to
it
the
comes
full
back
board.
for a vote.
Would it make sense to list in people's Friday packets?
But it can work. That's not how it does work, but that's how it can work.
That's not how it should work.
But within our laws, that's how, but it's feasible that that's how it can work.
A single board member does not say, or should not have the appropriate authority to say, I want this reviewed. It comes to the board to say, does the board agree that it should be reviewed?
I think at
Yes,
any time
Yes.
a board member
Yes.
has a question
Yes.
about it to be reviewed, that it will come to the full board. I mean, if nobody has a question with it, then it could go as reviewed and,
I think
Makes
that this
sense.
is a very dangerous move and a very concerning precedent to remove the opportunity for the board as a whole to have that time to see that a policy has been reviewed and then agreed that no change is necessary for the
We
moment in
have
time.
I don't think that
That's
we
not
are
being taken away.
removing that opportunity.
Well, you're removing the vote, which is a confirmation that that has taken place.
Would
That's just
it help if
micromanaging.
in the Friday packet before the policies committee met that you had an idea of what they were going to be reviewing? If it listed you're going to be reviewing 2401.
No, you're missing my point. My point being the vote is what is important at the table.
but if you don't agree, then we can bring it to a vote, is what they're saying.
I think we're,
Because it is double doing the work and also taking away the idea of what the committee's purpose is.
I think what has been happening now, my understanding is, and Roseanne can clarify since she was policy chair beforehand, is that the policy committee was reviewing all, policies, and if no changes were made, I think it was just remaining as it was.
No.
There was no
Never aware of
review
that.
stamped, correct? There was no update on the date. It didn't necessarily come before the full board. Am I wrong?
Yes.
That was,
Yes.
that was my assumption too, because there are many policies that have not been looked at for many, many years.
Well, just look at the bylaw policy. It was last approved March 7th, 2000.
Right.
So for 13 years, nothing happened in this.
Or did we take out a bunch of dates every time it was reviewed?
No.
No.
Every time it's revised, there's another
Yeah,
another
say
line.
revised.
Right.
So if it was revised 5 times, there'd be 5 revised and approved
Yes.
dates.
Well, if it's revised, if
Right.
there's no revision,
Then it
this
stays
is
as
a
the last
mechanism
revised
for
date.
saying, we've looked at this. This hasn't been sitting for 13 years. We've looked at it, and it's still what happens in our district, and it remains the effective policy today.
I understand exactly what you're saying. I disagree with what you're saying.
Okay.
I
well,
don't
maybe we're
disagree
just
with
gonna
the
have
process
to
that you're
agree to
undertaking.
disagree.
However, I disagree that I think it's the responsibility of the board to be involved with, the primary, as I said, responsibility of the board to be involved with the review and the understanding of all of the policies that we support. And if we agree that a policy is under review and doesn't require any change, that the operation is appropriate as defined within that policy, we should commemorate that with our vote. That is our job.
Okay, well, for purposes of moving us along tonight, this is the recommendation of the policy committee, and I think, the other members of the committee, if this remains our recommendation, maybe, should we take a separate vote on this one particular policy? Because the other ones are not gonna be anywhere near as controversial, I don't think.
That's fine. Yeah. we'll
So
do
can
one
I
by one.
amend my motion and we'll vote on this separately, and then we'll move on to the others? So I would move that the board, adopt for first reading policy 0131, bylaws and policies. Do I have a second?
Second.
Can our old discussion stay as our,
I have 3 questions.
okay,
They're quick though.
shoot.
We say the bylaws and policy will be maintained online. Are they online now?
As they have been adopted by the board, since we made an informal agreement to put them online, yes, they've been going online. So as soon as they're updated, they'll go online.
When do you think we'll be through all of
Oh, gosh.
5 years.
them? So could we get them all online and then update them as we update them?
All of them are currently online in our BOE docs on that website.
Yeah, they're not necessarily
They're
available
not
to the
necessarily
public.
public, but
Right, so could we just put that in a public section? Because I don't see why we wouldn't. It's a public document.
Yeah.
Just move it. Right. Next
I mean, I'll
que-
talk to Rosemary. I don't know what the logistics of that are, but that's certainly a conversation that we can have.
Next question was, we say the copies of proposed drafts will be made available to staff members and the public, and comments will be invited. So when we look at this policy now that we're modifying, was this sent out to the public? Was this distributed?
Well, it's going down for first reading now, so this is the opportunity for public comment would happen now.
But has the public seen it?
No.
So how could they comment?
Tell me where you are, Rich, so I can
Sure.
On
follow.
the agenda.
yeah,
No. Was this attached to the agenda?
yes, it's
Yes.
in the agenda.
It's attached.
In the
Okay.
public
So
agenda?
Yes.
I don't have, I only know what I have on my desk.
I don't think these get attached to the agenda.
Okay, can you just tell me where you are,
Yes,
just because
yes,
I'm
bottom of page 2.
visually challenged?
Yeah,
Bottom
no,
of
sure.
page what?
Bottom of page 2, number 2. It says, if a recommendation for a new or revised policy results from referral for study, a proposed draft will be submitted to the board for discussion and approval on first reading. Copies of the proposed draft will be made available to staff members and the public, and comments will be invited. Changes, blah, blah, blah. So I'm just asking how do we get these to the public before the meetings where we vote on them? And it may be as simple as just posting.
I believe these are on as an attachment. I believe these are given to the public. It's the administrative memos that are not part of the public agenda,
Well, that would answer the question.
right? Does somebody have?
I'd understood that they were.
Give me 1 second.
Well, there's agenda right there. Is it?
It's just whether or not it's
That's
on
not
the
the same
online
one that
version
gets
or not.
posted.
Bylaws. It's on there.
And that's posted? Like Friday, I could have gotten that if I was a member of the public?
I
Yes.
believe so, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so that answers the question.
Yeah.
And what about the actual data of the content of the policy, not just the name of it?
The actual policy is
The actual
attached to the
policy.
agenda. Yes.
And available online. That's last time I was online, that's what I found. I didn't go up on Friday.
If that's the case, then there's no issue. Then my final question was just, what is a regulation? And how does that get amended?
I had the same question at the policies meeting. The way it was explained is the policy is more or less the law. The regulation is how it's to be imposed or carried out.
So who can
Just
amend
more
that?
I can't.
It's part of the policy. I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Yeah, it's spelling out how I'm going to administer, generally speaking. So the policy committee can certainly work on it, but often it really is what the administrator is going to do, not the board policy.
Does the board approve it?
It actually depends, not always. It's my understanding. We have not always approved all regulations. Some specific ones have been brought to the table, but not all regulations have been approved. All policies are approved, not all regulations.
And there seems to be a trend now, however, with all of the statutes from the state, that regulations and policies are tending to look more similar, I think, than they had been in the past.
Yes.
Can we agree to review regulations?
We do, as at the policy committee level, we review the regulations when we review the policy.
And don't you get the regulations for review?
Yeah, that's why I was surprised it's not in here.
Never
There's
was.
no mention of regulations in here.
Right,
Never
So
was.
there's technically no requirement that we review
right.
them.
But it's been practice of this board that we review them and revise
Right, so
them.
I guess my question would be, should we put our practice in writing?
Would it require multiple readings and votes on each, or a simple yes and no?
Or
I think
Do we
perhaps
treat it like a policy, or do we?
it's been a while, but the last time I spoke to our board attorney regarding this, it was that the board does not approve the regulations, except if it's required by a statute. The regulations are for the administration of the district, not the policy of the board. But we can check, see if that's still the case.
If that's the case, that's fine. Just seemed odd to me that we do get them, we review them, we approve them, and there was just no mention.
Rich, to answer your previous question about whether or not these policies are online, it's not. They're not part of the main document.
That gets posted on Fridays.
Right.
Then
Okay.
they should
The
be.
attachments aren't.
So then we should probably just change that, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
So, okay.
yes, absolutely.
All right,
Change the procedure or change the?
add them on Friday. So
Make
then-
sure that they are
Right.
correct. Yes.
Gretchen, on page 2, development of bylaws and policies,
Yes.
after the first sentence, bylaws and policies, the explanation only uses the word policies.
Okay, so
I would really like to see bylaws added, so that it's, each time policies is mentioned, it's called bylaws and policies. I think that's a more comprehensive statement, and it represents the intention of the heading of the paragraph.
Absolutely, we can add that.
Actually, I would ask that you look through the policy for that.
Yeah,
and
to
if
make it
it's-
consistent.
And if it's omitted, I would ask that it be consistent. Because sometimes when you're looking for guidance and you're reading specific words, if you're not finding everything's clarified and written out, you don't quite know. Or you could use it as a loophole.
You read it the way you want to read it.
I would
No,
prefer,
you're right. We're
Yep,
putting
yep,
it,
yep.
absolutely.
I would prefer that not take place. On the top of page 3, and I do apologize, I've had these comments in my head for a while, and you should have had them ahead of time. The paragraph that starts, bylaws may be amended at any regular meeting. I've never known how to interpret this relative to paragraph 1 on page 1. This paragraph refers to the 10-day notice to board members for bylaw change. And the first paragraph in the policy lumps bylaws with policies, which says that they can be amended at any time. So I've always felt that there was a conflict in the way that it was written, and I wasn't sure how to interpret it. And I wondered if there was some way to make it more consistent, either in the first paragraph at the beginning of the policy or this portion on page 3.
I have to admit, Jenny, I'm not following what you're saying.
She's saying that on page 1 it says that bylaws and policies can both be
Right,
amended at any time by a simple majority vote.
right.
On page 3 it says that to change the bylaws, how the board operates, board members need to be given 10 days notice before
Right.
that'll occur.
I
It's
don't
just
think
inconsistency.
I don't think it's inconsistent. I think it's an additional requirement on bylaws.
Except it's not really. Split it up into
Isn't
two
this
policies.
about the
One's for
actual
policies, one's for
adoption,
bylaws.
and this is about the amendment, notice of the amendment of the bylaws? That's the way I read it. One is about, I understand what you're saying, bylaws upon may be adopted and repealed at any meeting of the board by a majority of those present and voting, providing the proposed has been at the previous meeting that occurred 4 or more weeks.
This is the approval. This is when it's actually adopted.
It's amended also. It's just it's an additional requirement on amending bylaws.
It's distinguishing the bylaws from the policies
Yes, I
in the
understand.
sense that it needs to be a 10-day.
I understand. I know what it's doing. It's always kind of come to me, and Brendan actually hit the nail on the head, which was the question when I was guiding policy committee, question of whether or not we wanted to break up the two separate instruments, policy and bylaw, and make individual statements or policy statements for them. Because they're very similar, but in some regard, they're a little different.
And then you could use a third and just make a statement about whatever the attorney says in regards to regulation, so that there is no confusion.
All right. So this is what I recommend. I say we put this aside. But I don't feel like it's ever going to be productive for us to sit here and do this as a full board. So if we, especially in the instance where these have been out since March 8th, it seems like the comments need to come back before we're all here as a full board, because I feel like we're just going to spin our wheels. When we're in the policy committee, we're very focused on the language, and so, but it sounds like this one needs a little bit more work. So my recommendation is we set it aside.
Second.
Well, I want you to understand that from my point of view, this is the crux of how we operate.
I don't disagree, and I welcome and encourage each and every little comment. I just don't know that it's productive to take this time to do it.
Second.
So, but I have a question. Will we be discussing the possibility of separating bylaws and policy to making different statements? Is that what we'll be doing in policy?
I think it's a conversation that clearly, it seems like it's a conversation they've had before, and if we need to have it again, we will. Okay.
So you're withdrawing your motion
I'm
regarding
withdrawing the
policy
motion
0131.
regarding 131.
I second it.
Mitch always
Twice I second.
Sure, it was a formal motion, I thought.
I'll second anything at this point, but I just, no, seriously.
Okay,
I know,
so
but this is not a policy meeting. This is a Board of Ed meeting.
I guess
This
maybe,
is not
Ginny, since,
Going,
are there substantive comments on some of these other policies that you believe are gonna put us in the similar position, such that if I make a motion on them now, we're ultimately gonna have to withdraw it, or can I proceed with the other four?
Please proceed.
Okay. Or five, however many they are. So I would move that the board consider approving for first reading the following policies: 142, 142.1, 143, 144, and 145. And I will try to very briefly summarize the changes that we made.
I'll second it.
Oh, thank you, Rich. 142, board member qualifications, prohibited acts, and code of ethics. The only change that we made to this policy was in the final full paragraph on page 1, we changed criminal history record check to read criminal history background investigation. It was just made more sense and was consistent, I believe, with the statute. Any questions about that change or additional comments or changes that need to be made? Okay. 142.1 nepotism. On page 2, we made a clarification in the first paragraph regarding school district administrator being prohibited from exercising direct or indirect authority, supervision, or control over his or her relative. We just didn't feel like it was clear the way it read. It almost sounded like they couldn't supervise somebody else's relative, so we tried to clarify. Anything else on 142.1? 143, we made some formatting changes, and then we inserted executive county superintendent since the name of that position has changed. Anybody want to talk about that one?
The reference to commissioner in paragraph 4 was intentional, right?
I believe so, yes.
144.
Yes,
I don't see commissioner.
in number 4.
Number 4.
number 4,
143,
sorry.
number
143, number 4.
Yeah, that's consistent with the statute.
Okay, thanks.
144, board member orientation. We recommended changing that to board member orientation and training, since the policy actually is more inclusive than just the first, than just orientation. We also changed in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th paragraph, we took out the reference to CUSAC and just inserted the state monitoring requirements, since those seem to change so often. Rather than amend the policy every time, we had some more general language. And then finally, the very final paragraph was added. It includes the HIB training language from the Strauss-Esme policy, which was not previously included in our policy.
Dana, do you track all the board members in terms of making sure, like these last 2 paragraphs, that we do the advanced training and the HIB?
Yes.
Okay.
We do.
And then finally, I'm sorry, anything on that? 145, board member resignation and removal. Other than some format changes, we added language to number 3, which made it consistent with the statute. Basically, we just included the language from the statute for another grounds for termination of membership of the Board of Ed. Any questions on that one? Okay, then I think we're ready for a vote.
Rich Matesic,
Yes.
Lucy Biegler,
Yes.
Ann Carey,
Yes.
Brendan Galligan,
Yes.
Roseanne Kirsted,
Yes.
Ginny Lights,
Yes.
Gretchen Oleg,
Yes.
Mitch Slater.
Yes.
I would next ask the board to affirm policy, well, I would move that the board affirms the superintendent's decisions on 13M01, 13T02, 13T03 for the reasons set forth therein. Do I have a second?
Second.
Rich Matesic,
Yes.
Lucy Biegler,
Yes.
Ann Carey,
Yes.
Brendan Galligan,
Yes.
Roseanne Kirsted,
Yes.
Ginny Lights,
Yes.
Gretchen Oleg,
Yes.
Mitch Slater.
Yes.
Nothing
Anything
else. Thank
All right.
you.
Good job. Curriculum, instruction, and programs. Roseanne.
I would like to ask the board to approve an overnight field trip for Westfield High School varsity girls lacrosse team to Hilton Head, South Carolina from March 24th through March 28th. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
While SIP has recently discussed the timing of field trips and that they should come to the SIP before they come to the full board, that is for, from what I understand, from what I've learned recently, that is for curricular field trips, and that is why this sports field trip has not come to the SIP committee first. It has come straight to the full board.
No,
What's the difference? What's the difference?
That's what I was told. So,
no. The field committee has always reviewed all field, including band.
well, band
all
is a
field
curricular,
trips.
I guess.
Well, what is the
Yeah.
purpose of this trip?
Team
To
building.
I think it's a tournament,
Team
isn't it?
building and workout, really.
So it's not like it's some tournament or
Oh,
championship
There will be,
where there was minimal
games.
So
notice.
there was a whole memo to the board on it,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Said that it's a week of lacrosse in South Carolina. It'll
Right.
promote team building, it'll promote competition with different levels of play. I mean, I don't know, my takeaway was it's lacrosse in another forum, and day after day of learning.
No, I meant
And-
like notice if it was a national championship, they don't have enough time to go to the SIP committee and then the
Right.
full board for
No.
approval.
Right, right, it
That's
wasn't
not
that.
a
Got it.
field
I'm
trip.
sorry, right?
Right. Just another point, and the students and the families are paying for this trip. It's not
Right.
as though the district is paying for it.
All trips like that.
Yes.
I think, the trip is fine, but I don't think, our discussion in SIP, when we had the discussion about the field trips, I don't remember any mention of taking some field trips out of that discussion. It
Right.
was, actually, I think I was the one that raised it,
I
and it was,
agree. Yeah.
and it was all field trips. And also, I forget the time, but, I mean, they're supposed to apply to go away
Right.
months in advance. So this is very late as well. But my main
I
point
agree,
is that
right.
it should be
So-
all field
I
trips.
bet
It's not
Sandy can
just-
give us some
So
color,
my-
I
well,
would think, since she's
The
there.
point of venturing the procedural
Well, she was
issues
freezing,
is
right?
that
So,
I didn't want SIP to think this was going unnoticed, that what we had decided was
No, I appreciate
not
it.
being
It definitely,
followed.
right.
And this is the first athletic field trip that I've seen in my long tenure on the board of 18 months. So I was not clear as what I knew what we had decided upon, but I didn't know if in fact sports fell into that. So
I
was
mean,
just
actually, we're meeting on
articulating the
Thursday.
process, right, so, right.
So this could have come to SIP on Thursday and been on the agenda Thursday night. I'm just talking about procedure
Yes,
here.
right.
I'm
I
not
agree.
talking
Yes,
about,
I brought up
I think it
procedure.
sounds like a
That's
great
right.
trip.
Yes,
That's
I
not
agree with you,
Yeah.
Ann.
my problem
Yeah.
with the trip. It's just that we
Right.
just implemented a new procedure and now we are
right.
breaking it immediately, so.
So what happened, Sandy?
Well, we just started the season, so that's why it's so late, because we have to have tryouts, and it's only a varsity team that's going away. So it couldn't have come months before, because just started.
No, I'm sure, Sandy, you haven't done anything wrong. I'm talking about what internally happened in the
Ever.
SIP committee. That's
Yeah,
all I'm
no,
talking
I just
about.
wanted to know why it was coming
Yeah.
so late, because we just made our team.
the way it works, it's logical.
But you could still plan a team. You could still plan a trip, even if you didn't know the players. I mean, in September. I mean, you could say,
You
"Oh,
could-
the varsity team always does X."
This is the first time.
Right.
You couldn't quite present the paperwork, though, that's required for a trip, right? Because that identifies who's going, how many are going, the fact that medical issues have been checked, et cetera. So you couldn't submit the paperwork until the team is picked. And just another, it's a minor point, but so Thursday night is a public hearing, so it's not as though there's going to be a full agenda. I mean, otherwise, that might have been great. SIP could have reviewed it, they could have understood the reason why it was later, and then it could be voted on, but it's a public hearing on Thursday night.
So we'll review our expectations again in SIP.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's it.
Anything
Ready
else?
for vote? Rich Matesic,
Yes.
Lucy Biegler,
Yes.
Ann Carey,
Yes.
Brendan Galligan,
Yes.
Roseanne Kirsted,
Yes.
Ginny Lights,
Yes.
Gretchen Olig,
Yes.
Mitch Slater.
Yep.
All right. Anything else, Cynthia?
No,
No, sorry.
we're meeting on Thursday.
So I hear.
Got enough on your agenda?
That brings us to finance. In Mark's absence, I would ask the board to consider finance motions 1 through 11 with a revised motion number 2, which was at your seat, specifying that the FiberTech Networks contract is actually a 5-year contract, beginning with the 2013-14 school year. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Mitch. I would just like to point out a few of the items. Item number 10 is the acceptance of a donation from Sharif Joseph and Marie Saki to Tamaqua Elementary School, a monetary donation. Item number 11, a monetary donation from an anonymous donor to Wilson Elementary School for leveled readers. And monetary gifts from the Westfield Coalition of the Arts to the Fine Arts Department to have a guest conductor spend a day rehearsing with band students, and to the Washington and Lincoln School arts teachers to purchase supplies and visual aids for their arts appreciation programs. We thank you for those gifts. Are there any other comments or questions on the finance motions? All right.
Rich Matesic?
Yes.
Yeah, actually, sorry.
Oh, I apologize.
Just with
The last one.
the expected reimbursement for conferences, I spoke with Dr. Dolan about obtaining further clarification on some of these things, particularly things that seem exorbitantly high. There's statute and contracts that are already in place, but
They were textbook.
caught me off guard when I was flipping through them.
All right, and there's one in particular that we're wondering if there was a miscalculation, just
Yeah.
the numbers
Yeah.
don't seem to work. So I can certainly speak with Mrs. Ball, and as I mentioned, that approval is the maximum it can be, but nothing is reimbursed until actual documents are provided. Documents the wrong word, but receipts, et cetera, are provided. So, but we can look into it even before the trips take place.
Not only do receipts have to be provided, there's also requirements on how much we can reimburse for an actual hotel.
Right.
Depending on where it's located. So we check all of that so that none of that gets exceeded, even if this amount might be higher, just as an
Right.
FYI.
Thank you.
So can we approve it, or do we hold off on it?
Well, I would suggest you probably approve it, because I don't know when all these conferences are, but if you don't approve it, we're gonna have problems with people that want to go on conferences between now and April 9th.
Plus, these are projections, right?
Yes.
And the actual payments are contingent on submitting.
And they have to follow all the guidelines, correct? So even if this gets approved, if it's not within the guidelines, it's not gonna get approved when the purchase order is submitted.
And with your specific questions, you can share those with Mrs. Ball.
Absolutely.
She can check that.
Any other comments or questions?
Rich Matesic?
Yes.
Lucy Biegler?
Yes.
Ann Carey?
Yes.
Brendan Galligan?
Yes, with the exception of 5. I'm an employee of one of the vendors, so I'm going to abstain on 5.
Okay. Roseanne Kirsted?
Yes.
Ginny Lights?
Yes.
Gretchen Olig?
Yes.
Mitch Slater?
Yes.
All right, that's it for finance. I would ask the board to note the notes for the record, which brings us to legislation.
Apropos of tonight's conversation, we will be meeting to review the anti-bullying law. We have to get a date and how it's working in the district and providing comment if we feel it's necessary to our legislators.
Thank you. Any unfinished business? Any new business? Any ad hoc committee reports?
We're meeting the first week of April, and I'll update at the following meeting.
Any other ad hoc committee reports? All right. Liaison reports.
I have one. I'm just trying to figure out what day it was. Anyway, earlier this month I attended a PTC President's Committee meeting.
And there was a very active conversation just about substance abuse at the high school. I thought it worth mentioning just because it seemed like it just was an issue that was on everyone's mind, and I'm sure that it's an issue that is constantly on, our minds as parents. But it was definitely helpful. I think Dr. Dolan was very encouraging of parents who were saying, but everyone knows, to, provide more information, not just assume that everyone knows, and to the extent that you have information that you think you should share for that, to occur. And also, just, I think people are apprehensive about sharing because they're worried about the repercussions for their own children, and just reassuring that sources don't always have to be disclosed. But it was just a very kind of active conversation. I don't know if you want to add to it, but
Sure. I think what I would say is, so the conversation came about because the high school PTSO had just provided an evening,
Right.
an informative evening with law enforcement there, with represented Peter Renwick was there, Maureen Mazzarese.
Working with students and faculty in the district and supporting students to be the best that they can be. And after that ceremony where they honor Andrea Lowe at 7:30, there are breakout sessions covering a multitude of topics that would interest people with children with special needs, and even general ed children having to do with reading, sensory issues, a whole host of things. So if you're available, it's at Edison Middle School tomorrow night at 7.
Thank you. Any other reports? Brennan?
While I'm not an official liaison, last Thursday I attended a meeting with Project 79 to discuss potential uses for technology, innovative ways they can bring it into their classroom. It was very informative, collaborative, and active discussion. Lasted almost 2 hours. We had administrators, guidance counselors, teachers, students, both past and present, looking at different ways that they can take advantage of independent study opportunities, all hypothetical at this point, as they continue to have discussions and have proposals. They'll be going through the appropriate committees and eventually to the full board.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, I would then recognize the public for questions and/or comments. Seeing no one come to the podium, I would ask the board to approve the following resolutions. Resolved that the Board of Education move into private session for the purpose of discussing matters rendered confidential by state and federal law, personnel, pending or anticipated litigation, and pending or anticipated contract negotiations. And be it further resolved that any discussion held by the board which need not remain confidential, and the results of the discussion will be made public as soon as practicable. A second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? The meeting is adjourned.